You're listening to audio from the Decidedly podcast. For more information, find us on Instagram at Decidedly Podcast.
What do you think's the coldest you've ever been in water? Was it the time you jumped in that glacier lake in Alaska, or just doing your cold plunge? I don't know how cold that was.
I mean, definitely in the 30s. Like, I've done that plenty of times.
Is that how cold your cold plunge is?
It's 38.
I remember doing that one time over at your house. I think it was in just like 3 minutes. And getting out, and just my skin felt like needles were all just, it was numb. I could not feel my skin.
Yeah.
Which is a weird feeling.
You get used to it, like physically and mentally. I think you get more used to it mentally over time. It's like any other type of discomfort that's building something positive. Like if you don't lift weights and you go lift weights, yes, physically, like it'll be terrible. You're going to be in pain. And then the recovery time is going to be very long. Like you're going to be sore for several days. If you go lift weights regularly, like even by the second time you lift weights, the third time, that soreness and recovery doesn't take nearly as long, but the actual physical pain of lifting the weights is something that mentally is easier. Like the sensation is the same, but you understand, oh, this isn't harming me. Yeah. And so if you were to cold plunge like twice a week, even not even every day, just twice a week, by the third time you did it, you would not even, it's still uncomfortable. It still sucks. It's still super cold, but you wouldn't be like in pain, I don't think.
Yeah.
And I think that's why people do it, is it builds this it's
a mental challenge,
ability to block out things that like are not helping you. You know, when you're in the cold water, the focusing on the discomfort is not helping you. Yeah. You have to focus on something else. So when you're grinding in your business and you're focusing on how much you're working, it's like that's such a loser mindset. It's not helping. But speaking of cold plunges, cold water, our guest today has spent a lot more time than I ever have dealing with the cold. Ryan Stramrood, self-proclaimed couch potato until age 30, until he was challenged by a friend to do some long-distance swimming, turned into one of the most prolific and acclaimed ice swimmers in the world. Today, he's broken world records. He's swam miles and miles and miles in freezing cold water. And he now speaks to business owners and leaders about his unique experience and what it teaches us about the human mind, our capabilities, and pushing past your comfort zone. So listen to our conversation. I think you'll learn a lot. You'll hear some really interesting stories. I'm Sanger Smith with my dad, Sean Smith, and this is Decidedly. Thanks for being here, Ryan. The more I learn about you and your story, the more psychotic I think you are. So,
why do you say that,
dude? I'm like, this guy. So this guy's a swimmer. Oh, he swims in ice. Oh, he didn't start till he was an adult. What do we like? That's very hardcore. Very, very hardcore.
Sounds a bit silly, hey?
Well, when you put it that way, it does. You famously sort of talk about how you went from couch potato to world record breaking ice swimmer. What was the triggering event that made you decide to move in that direction?
Well, one certainly doesn't wake up and decide to become an ice swimmer. I don't think anyway, certainly not for me, because it's just horrible. But for me, you know, I was a couch potato at the age of nearly 30, 29, going on 30, and needed to change something in my life. And it wasn't a massive decision. It was just getting off the couch, making that small decision. And I started to swim, not in ice water at first, just in a swimming pool. I joined a little swimming squad. And then I started to expand a little bit. We can get into the nitty-gritty a little bit later. But all the water in my home, in my hood in Cape Town, South Africa, is pretty cold. So it is, you know, and I don't ever wear a wetsuit. It's always just my Speedo trunks and goggles and a cap. And every time I got into the ocean, I was in cold water, and I would have just an absolutely profound impact on me. You know, that horrible ice cream headache and all the shivers and all the kind of things that happen that made me get out. And it took me a long time to start to break through that and to start to realize how unbelievably impactful the element of cold is and how it impacts us humans. But what I also realized, obviously, we haven't evolved well to handle the cold. We've evolved very well to avoid it. So when we throw ourselves into cold water, a profound barrage of defense mechanisms is happening, firstly mentally, and secondly in your body, that is convincing you to get out. And first, most people, 99.9% of people will go, well, I mean, that makes total sense. We're going to get out then. But if you keep repeating it, you start to understand that that defense mechanism to get you out is very overzealous. Where your mind is telling you it's time to get out because you can't handle the cold is not where the time to get out is. And slowly but surely, through lots of repeats and through long stories, I started to understand this and started to figure out how to extend my time in the cold. So a very long answer to your initial question is I became fascinated in the impact of cold, and I started to push my own personal boundaries within it.
What would make you even want to seek to push those personal boundaries? Because it seems like that physiological response to get the hell out of this cold water, it seems so natural, and there's such a reward for following that instinct. Why would you want to fight that?
Well, it's a great question, actually, but it's more, the answer is more swimming related. So here in South Africa, on my doorstep is an island called Robben Island. Mm-hmm. That's where Nelson Mandela spent 17 of his 27 years incarcerated. And it's about 4.5 miles from the island to the beach, which is 7.3 kilometers. And it's a massive swim. And back when I started, very few people did the Robben Island swim.
When did you start doing that?
It would have been 2003 is when I did my first proper cold water swim. So it was about getting from A to B. It wasn't about me trying to experiment with the cold. I wanted to swim from Robben Island to what we call Bloberg Beach, the shortest route there was. But anyone who's got an element of discipline can get themselves fit to do a 4.5 mile swim. It's a long way, don't get me wrong. You've got to be pretty darn fit. But it's exceptionally hard, exponentially tougher to do that unprotected when you have the element of cold. So it was a challenge to do that distance first. I didn't understand much about the cold in the beginning. And, you know, a lot of people will be saying, well, why don't you just wear a wetsuit? Which makes a lot of sense, still makes a lot of sense to a lot of people.
Wearing a wetsuit also gives you some buoyancy too. So it kind of like makes the swimming part easier, not only the cold.
100%. So let's just use the Robben Island swim as the starting point. So the challenge of that swim is not the distance. As I was saying, anyone can do the distance. It's doing the distance exposed to the cold. So if someone does it in a Speedo costume versus someone who does it in a wetsuit, it's chalk and cheese. You can't compare it because they're just doing the distance. They're eliminating the element of cold. Whereas those who do it in the more purest form are exposing themselves, and we'll get into it, I'm sure, in a bit, what that does to your mind to try and push through those barriers and to perform for an extended period in cold water. That is what started to fascinate me.
Let's put it in perspective a little bit, because I've been there a couple times. Sanger and I were there a few years ago. The water between the shore and Robben Island is not only cold, but quite choppy. But what is the temperature? I mean, it's got to be 50, 60 degrees.
The coldest it gets is about 45, 46 Fahrenheit. It will average around 50. So I've got to do my conversions. We work in Celsius. So it's usually around 11, 12, 13 Celsius, which is about 52 to up to 56 Fahrenheit. And it does get warmer. It will go up to about 66 Fahrenheit. Those are the days that we live for.
That's still cold, though. That's the 65 is still cold for people that don't swim in cold water.
That's crazy cold. I remember one time there was
that's way different than 65 degrees air.
Yeah. I remember years ago, Sanger and I went on a hike. We were in Alaska, and we had made this big hike up to a glacier, which we were going to be ice climbing for a few days. And at the end of any glacier is a lake. And so Sanger decides after the end of this hike, where we're just worn out, he's going to go jump in the lake and cool off. And I don't think I've ever seen anybody come out of water faster than what you did. You almost walked on water coming out of it. Yeah. But so my question is, with that level of cold, you've got this automatic response of fight, flight, or freeze. And so this maybe sounds like a joke, but it's a serious question. When you have this automatic response as a result of a threat, and the cold is this threat, this fight, flight, or freeze, what's impacting you first? What is happening to you when you jump in like that?
So firstly, just something that was mentioned, the element of cold in air is profoundly different to the element of cold in water in terms of its impact on a human. And the exponent is 25 times more brutal in the water than in the air. So I always give the example in my keynotes that if you're standing in your garden and the air temperature is 50 Fahrenheit versus jumping into your swimming pool where the water is 50 Fahrenheit, how much quicker are you going to die, essentially? And the answer is 25 times quicker. So what happens when you jump into the water is quite profound. And I think through probably, I'm no medical guy, but hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, our very powerful minds knows this. So when you throw yourself in there, you deny the ability of rational thought. So to answer your question, the first thing that happens is your head goes into overdrive. It implements pain, panic, and fear. They come together in a split second to accentuate self-doubt. When it's really cold, you deny the ability of rational thought. You can't be in that environment and go, okay, let's figure this out. What's actually happening here? Am I about to die, or is this just a response? You deny that ability. You get that hyperventilation. While all that's spinning in your head and in your chest, your body does its own defense mechanisms to get you out. The blood starts rushing from extremities, so like from your fingers, not just fingers and toes, from your calves and thighs and biceps. It all rushes out of those extremities into your center core. So all of this starts happening in the first couple of minutes in the cold. And that is as far as most people get. So that's the answer to your question. That's what hits you first. Then, if you're brave enough to stay in it and push through that, things calm down again. You get your breathing back. You start to feel pretty okay. The pain disappears. Everything starts to relax a little bit. And you'll be okay for a while, depending on your body weight and how much energy you're generating and heat. Eventually, that cold starts seeking into your core, and that's where things get really serious.
So there's got to be some physiological limits then at that temperature beyond which the human body just is not going to continue. What are those?
Well, look, don't ask me for the science around it, but I stand on stages around the world, and I talk about, I'm an inspirational speaker, and inspirational speakers generally have the habit of going that anything you put your mind to is possible. I'm way more realistic than that. It's not. There are only two outcomes for you out in the freezing cold, like when I swim in Antarctica. Either I am going to warm Antarctica's water up to my core temperature, or it's going to cool me down, right? What do you think is going to happen? We both know the answer to that. So there is a limit. There is a physiological limit as to how much time you can spend in cold water unprotected, without a doubt. But the important part is where your mind tells you that endpoint is miles away from where it really is.
Have you ever pushed it too far?
You can push. Have I pushed it too far? That's also an interesting question. I say no, because I've pushed it very far and been very hypothermic and been in quite a bad state. But that was all part of my pushing my own barriers. And that was me learning and understanding the cold. I've never liked the cold, by the way. So it's not like I look forward to a cold shower.
You picked a strange hobby then.
Yeah, I know, but it's a classroom. That's why. It became such a classroom. Just to touch on that. So you take that Robben Island swim, it's kind of the Everest of swims for a lot of open water swimmers. They want to do it once and get across and tick it off, and it's very hard. It's become a training swim for me. So I've done it now 144 times. I was the guy who'd done it the most in the world. One guy's overtaken me now. But what fascinates me and where the biggest learning has become is that every single time I've done that Robben Island swim, I've just found myself becoming negative. I start to look for reasons why I can get into the little support boat alongside me, not for reasons why I can make it to the beach. And that's what started to fascinate me. I've done it so many times, but yet all my mind can think of is find the right excuse, Ryan, to get out of this water so you can get inside that little boat and wrap a nice blanket around you and have a hot chocolate. look for the excuses. And that just became like an absolute epiphany for me. And, it's a defense mechanism of our minds keeping us safe, which is great for the survival of the human species, but it has evolved to also keep us safe from, from the pain or humiliation and consequence that comes from failure. It's almost the same thing. So it's got this very real value to it. And then it's also got this overzealous, in our more modern world, steering our decisions and steering how we do things and steering how we perceive fear in quite a, if there's such a word as an overzealous way. So I always present two lines. If we've got like the mind's endpoint and the real endpoint. So the mind's endpoint is kind of where you jump, let's use the cold water, you jump into cold water and the mind says, not at hell, buddy, I'm getting out, tells you to get out long before you actually need to. But then further down the line, there's the real endpoint where probably you should get out because, there's a reality to this. And between those two lines, that's where the magic happens. That is where the magic happens. That's where the growth happens. But that's also a very uncomfortable environment. So you don't want to stay in there. You have to get past that mind's endpoint. Yeah. You've got to get into that middle space. You've got to figure it out. You've got to try and make some sense of it and calm yourself and start looking at it for the opportunities within that space. And that's where the growth happens big time.
What's interesting about long distance swimming as opposed to long distance running is that mental battle happens with anybody that's run any amount of distance. I think has felt that like desire to quit, and quitting running is like even easier than quitting swimming. You just stop. Swimming, you gotta at least like get out of the boat, and if there is no boat, then you just have to keep swimming. But running, you could just stop. And so there's this, I could quit. These are all the reasons I could quit. If this goes wrong, then nobody's going to judge me for quitting for this reason, right? But there's something that happens in running, I think maybe is a little bit different than swimming, in that like the long-term physical toll can start to hurt you before you like actually literally collapse and die. Whereas in swimming, nobody has, that I know of, lingering knee pain because they swam too much, for example. But I know lots of guys, me included, you go out, you run way too far one day and go, oh my gosh, I'm going to limp for the next 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So the impact on your body is a lot higher in running and many other land-based sports. Swimming, obviously, you're going to get there's lots of repetition.
Yeah,
so
but that allows you to push the mental barrier farther, I would imagine.
It does, I suppose, yeah. So, I mean, there are lots of swimmers with shoulder issues, by the way, because the rotator cuff is something that goes in swimming. But yeah, we don't have the heavy impact, which is why you still find 80-year-old swimmers doing decent distances. And it's a sport that's very kind to your body.
Yeah, I think people don't understand, who haven't swam open water, how much more difficult it is than swimming in a pool. Like, not only do you not get to kick off the wall in the open water, but just being able to go in a straight line is so difficult.
It's very difficult. So I'll give you a little bit of insight just for the audience. So when you want to do a distance swim and you want it to be recognized, that means you need to start clear of the water with both your feet out of it, if possible, unless you're on a rocky cliff or something, then they'll let you. Once you walk into that water, you may not touch or have any kind of help whatsoever until you walk out the other side, besides your support boat, which is alongside you, that can throw you your feed. Because depending how long, I mean, a lot of people think, but you're in water, so why do you need to drink? I mean, that's, if you think about it, it's a bit silly because you are expending a lot of energy in the water. You need to hydrate. And if it's a very long swim, you obviously need to consume the right amount of carbs as well. So if you, again, want to be purist, we only wear a Speedo type costume that's sort of, or jammers that are above the knee. It must give you no buoyancy. You get a pair of goggles and you can have a swimming cap, a silicone swim cap. So not one of those neoprene wetsuit looking ones. That is your pure form. You are in some areas allowed to apply grease, but that's more for chafe and jelly stings. And then you're on your own. So if you're doing like an English Channel, which took me 30 hours, from when I walked in till when I walked out 13 hours later, I could touch nothing. So what I explain quite a lot is that, if you hit the wall in a running race or a cycle race, it's usually devastating, right? The tank is empty. You've got nothing more to give. It's pretty much the end of your race unless you're able to kind of walk and still get in through the finish line in the allocated time. When you hit the wall and you are, for example, 7, 8, or 9 hours into an English Channel swim, and you are freezing cold, the waves have been rolling you around, you've been drinking salt water, you are chafed, you're stung by jellyfish, it has now started to get dark. If you even put one hand on the support boat alongside you to take a little break, you immediately disqualified, or anything else that helps you, and you still got 5 or 6 hours of swimming to go. It's absolutely brutal. And you're comparing the two. I don't really like this comparison because I've never done Everest, but I was listening to an interview just 2 weeks ago with someone who's done Everest and swum the English Channel. And he puts the English Channel way more difficult than his Everest. And again, I'm not attesting to that or commenting. It was just very interesting for me to listen to, because his reasoning was that you are so by yourself. There's no one to help you up the hill. There's no one to carry your bag. When you take a break to feed, you're treading water. Yeah. When they think about their wave. So when you're swimming in an absolute mirror flat water, right? You get to breathe to the side and everything's lovely. Okay, it's just cold, the cold seeping in. Throw in a little bit of wind and it just makes a little bit of chop on the water like this. Now you can't breathe there anymore. You've got to breathe a lot higher. So you're lifting your body, you're lifting your head. Now, that's fine over a short distance. When you're doing that for 13 hours, your neck starts to get stiff. You can't see where you're going. You're relying on the boat alongside you as your visual. So, there are a million things. I don't want to bore you with all the swimming talk. So I'll stop there and you can ask me questions if you're interested for more. But the differences are quite profound.
No, most people don't understand how taxing that is. The first triathlon I did with open water swimming was not a particularly long swim. It was an Olympic distance triathlon, but I dove into the water and the judge was on my left side. Yeah. And so I dive in, I start swimming, and like within 15 seconds, I go to breathe. I breathe on my right side, and I see a guy who looks strikingly similar to the judge, strikingly similar to the same dock that I jumped off of. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. They got these judges everywhere on this lake. And I keep swimming, and I hear someone go, "Is everything all right?" And then I pick my head up and I realized I had just done a complete 180, like right away. I mean, just right. I was so disoriented.
Yeah.
I had done zero open water practice. I had only practiced in a pool. So then I'm like, first of all, my time just after that, terrible. I mean, I couldn't mentally, I was so mentally shaken by that I was basically doggy paddling. I was like so afraid of just getting lost on this lake.
I'm sorry to hear.
Yeah, lifting your head up, just it throws you off, and I think most people don't practice that. You can really only practice it in the open water.
People don't practice it because they don't know to practice it. And also, if you do your first swimming event, generally they have these fairly big buoys. You pronounce it differently. That they markers that you got to swim around or whatever. You don't realize that you can't, when you're just a little head in water, you can't see those. Especially if there's a chop. So here's the size of your head and there's a chop on the water that big. You can't see anything. You can only see higher. So the tricks of open water swimming, if you're doing a race or, you always stand on the shoreline and you look exactly where those markers are. And then you look what's above them and making sure you get your angles right. So when you're swimming, you just got to put your head up and see the house on the hill in the distance. You knew that house with the red roof was in line with the yellow buoy that you got to aim for, because you can't see that yellow buoy until you're only 100 meters away from it. So there are lots of tricks of the trade.
So I want to talk about the mental preparation for doing a swim like that, but I want to back up just a bit and talk about the physical preparation. How do you get your body acclimatized to that level of cold?
Yeah, so to that level of cold, it's firstly, it never gets much easier. It's always horrible when you get in. So I'm just covering that because most people ask like, oh, does it ever get easier? No, it doesn't. However, by practicing it, it becomes way more familiar. So firstly, when you are training to do a very cold swim, you can't only be fit to do the distance. Let's say you want to do a 1 mile and it's an ice swim. So it's in water that is 40 Fahrenheit or below, which is very cold, right? You cannot be fit to do a mile swimming wise. You need to be fit to do quite a few miles because the element of cold is going to be brutal on your body and on your muscles. And they're going to lose all the blood and they're going to become uncoordinated and they're not going to propel you forward. So you have to get into those ice baths, in my case. You have to get into the cold ocean, which I'm blessed to have quite a lot around me. It's not that cold, but it's cold enough to feel how my muscles are going to react, feel how my head is going to pain, help me to develop the mental processes I need to do to get through that horrible period. But also I know the more I do it, that there's a horrible period for 5 minutes that I'm going to hate. And then I'm going to feel okay after that for a bit, until the next phase. So the answer to your question is repeat exposure. When I'm doing a really cold challenge somewhere in the world, I go to my local fishery down the way and I ask them to fill up these huge tubs, which, this cold immersion thing's kind of taken off around the world, but we do it really properly. You fill that thing properly up with ice and you're sitting there for 10, 16 minutes and it's properly brutal. While you're sitting in that, you start to understand what's happening, the blood rushing from your extremities, your head implementing pain, panic, and fear. And you got to try and figure out, right, I'm feeling all of this. How am I going to kind of manage that when I dive into the water for my race or my challenge or whatever it is? How am I not going to panic and sprint the first 200 meters and then not have enough energy for the 1,400 I've still got to do after that? How am I going to overcome that ice cream headache? Where's my mind going to go? And that is the beauty of the sport, if I can use the word beauty in context of extremely cold water, is the mental aspect. It's the mental control. It's the pushing through your own barriers that is really so very challenging.
So I would think that in addition to the physical work, and I'm sure there's breathing work that you're doing to sort of get ready to do this, what are you having to pre-decide so that you can control the mental aspect of it? Because it seems like that's really where the secret is in success, is the mental aspect.
The mental aspect is definitely what it is. And I don't have any wonderful tricks that I can teach. However, I'm very happy to share what I do personally. Firstly, I train hard. So the fitness is just discipline. You need to do that. You need to if you're not fit enough to try and jump in and bang out a mile, because let's just use a mile. Sometimes it's a lot longer. But the fitter you are, the harder you can push, which means the more heat you're going to generate. Okay, so that's number one. If you're not fit and you're going to go really slow, you're generating less body heat. That cold is going to seep in quicker. Me, before I jump in the water, someone asked me the other day, do you meditate? And I said, no, I've never meditated in my life. But it was then pointed out to me quite recently, that I do meditate. It's just because I just go into my own space. I blank everybody else out. Don't talk to me for a while. And I visualize that impact. I feel it. And the reason I can feel it is because I've practiced it. I've sat in those ice buckets. I've gone and swum in my oceans in colder and colder. I don't wait for the warm days. I look for the coldest days. And then I go out when everyone's huddled under blankets and it's blowing a howling gale and it's freezing cold. That's when I'll go get in that water. I will spend days before in our winters, not wearing a warm top, a jacket, walking around in the cold and feeling it and just understanding it and becoming as comfortable as I can with it within reason. So I spend maybe half an hour, depending on the scale of the swim, just understanding it. So when I dive in and I impact with that cold, I know exactly how to compute it. Never makes it easier. It never makes it nice. I've just got to get through it. And it's essentially toughening your mind up and toughening your body up to be able to get through it. And anyone can do it. It doesn't take anyone special. It's just a discipline, and you have to want to do it, right? Like I know as we started the podcast, it's like, why the hell are you doing this? It became a classroom for me. It was teaching me about myself and barriers that, I didn't think I could get through, and most people would never try and get through and wouldn't believe is possible to get through. It just became a fascination.
What do you think about while you're swimming?
Very different depending on what swim. So if I'm doing something, again, let's use the same old examples, the English Channel, which is a long 21-mile swim, and it's going to take you anywhere between 10 and 16 hours to swim. What you're thinking of then is very different to what you're thinking of if you're trying to do an ice mile as I did in Antarctica in 30 Fahrenheit. So it was -1 degree Celsius, which I think is 30 Fahrenheit. So it's just slightly below zero, where salt water freezes a little bit. I mean, below zero, below freezing. A little bit salt water freezes below. What I think of in an English channel, I had a mental strategy, and that was to stay cheerful, as silly as that sounds. Let's call it positive. I needed to stay positive, because as the cold sets in and the fatigue sets in and your throat is burning and you're stung by everything that's under the water, as soon as those negative thoughts start creeping in, especially when you've still got hours and hours and hours ahead of you, and it's now gotten dark most probably, and there's all these things. Once those negative thoughts start coming into your head, they spiral, and it's exceptionally hard to bring yourself out of that. So going into the English Channel, I had a whole strategy of when the times got really dark and tough, that's when I would laugh. I'd found something in my head to laugh about. When I take another gulp of salt water and it burns my throat, I'll laugh about it and say, this is what you subscribe to, pal. Don't moan about it, have a laugh about it. How horrible is this? Rather turn it into a positive. So I hope that makes some sense to you. Because
it makes a lot of sense.
It keeps the right endorphins going. It keeps the right dopamine in the right place. You also set yourself little small bite-sized chunks rewards. Don't try and swim to France and that. If you're looking up to see where the French mountains or coastline is, you're going to lose hope long before you get there. You've got to bite-sized chunks it, just like have a hot chocolate at your next feed. You know what the boat are going to throw you. That's what I look forward to.
Oh, man. No, both of those things make sense. Yeah, whenever I would run long distances, I would stagger water and salt and food at different time intervals so that I always only had 10 minutes until I got to do something. And so it's so stupid, but I'd be looking forward to taking my salt tab in 9.5 minutes.
I will add to that, and that's exactly what I do. But the addition to that is when you're doing a big swim, obviously what you need is the right stuff to fuel you and to make sure you've got all the right stuff in you, because what you put in is what you're going to get out. However, on my food feed charts are just things that I like. They add zero value to my nutritional plan, but I look forward to them. That hot chocolate, that bite of something that's going to be given to me, or that yummy something. It's just it's those little treats, and I know I'm going to get it. I've just got to do another 3 hours, and then I get that. Woo! And so you start setting those cherries, those little carrots rather, that drives you forward. So that's the long swim when you've got lots of time in your own head and you really need a mental strategy. When it comes to something like an ice mile, where you're swimming in water that's below 40 Fahrenheit, and you've got to do a mile and you're unprotected, that hypothermia sets in exceptionally quickly. There is no feeding during that. You're not going to stop and tread water and have a drink. It's start to finish, and you're going to go hell to water and get yourself. The quicker you get out is the only strategy you worry about. So obviously your mindset's very different for that. Not entirely different. It's still about keeping positive. But it's more about don't panic. And it's more about trust in your support team. So even though swimming is such an individual sport, you're the one in the water, the support team alongside you, especially in an ultra extreme cold swim where you die very quickly, they are your umbilical cord. So if they, take my Antarctica swim, if they were, chatting amongst each other or sending WhatsApps or SMSs and not focused on me, would have had a different outcome. I needed their eye contact. So I didn't have to think about anything. They were clapping. They were giving me the thumbs up during it. And that's the food that my brain needed for that kind of challenge, and many like it.
I've had this happen a few times in doing long runs where I get to this point and it becomes noticeable. I recognize that it's happening, that I get this feeling like I could do this forever. Like I could just keep doing this. Do you ever get that sort of swimmer's high, let's call it, when you're moving along?
Yeah, I think we call that flow. So you go into a sense of flow. So generally on a long swim, the beginning is usually the toughest by far, because you just can't calibrate that you've got another 20 miles ahead in this temperature, in these conditions. And, in swimming, the distance goes slowly, it takes a long time to do a mile. So, sometimes it can be very demotivating. And you also know that, every half an hour, whatever you've planned, you're going to get another feed, you're going to get stopped. So you kind of tally the time. But somewhere in the middle, I lose all concept of time. I go into what I think you're talking about is the flow. It's just all of those half an hours start going like this, and I'm just hitting my rhythm. I'm almost irritated when they stop me for a feed because I don't want to break the rhythm. I can go forever. But with swimming and the element of cold, eventually it's going to get to a point where you go like, where's the end? You kind of slowly slide out of it. But there's a nice chunk of it that's you think you can go forever.
Do you find that there becomes a spiritual element to getting to that place mentally where you're just in a state of flow and you're just moving along, and then you find that you're having to, or desiring to rather, chase that state?
Yeah, I like that. I think so. Whether it's spiritual, I'm fairly spiritual. I'm not religious at all, but I feel it's hard to answer. I feel a connection to something sometimes when I'm out there in the real difficult stuff, and I hang on to it, whatever it is. Right. I don't know. Can't really answer that.
Well, you were saying, the reason I asked that, you were talking about how forcing your mind to go to this place taught you things, taught you about yourself.
Yeah.
Other than teaching you about adjusting limitations, what did it teach you?
Oh, so much. Firstly, as I've mentioned, I wasn't an athlete for a long time. If I'm an athlete now, I don't know. But I used to look at people doing swims and put them on a pedestal and never, ever believe, or never even bring myself to the place of wanting to try and do that as well, because I just didn't believe that I could. So that's the one thing, once I did the first swim challenge and I had a little internal epiphany that I've been worshiping the people who've done that all my life, and yet here I've just done it. And it wasn't that hard. It took me a couple of really hard training sessions and periods. And so that it certainly taught me. Then the element of cold that I've now done around the world in some of the most hostile places has taught me a lot more, not just about myself, but also about how all of our human minds work, how defensive they are. But again, as I have mentioned, how overzealous they are to steer our decision-making. And the other thing I've realized is that this decision-making and the steering that is happening to pretty much everyone, and still me, absolutely including me, is happening at the back of our minds, subconsciously anyway. So it's not in the front of our minds. It's not something that we think about, oh, why am I making this particular decision? It's just obvious. You just go that way because it's the obvious thing to do. And what the element of cold has taught me is to actually stop and question it and to look at it with very different eyes. And that's why I spend a lot of time in the States nowadays, by the way. I work with a lot of C-level, real top-end businessmen who have achieved more in the business world than I ever will. But they are as subjected to these default settings of how we think and how we make decisions as when they were juniors. And they love the fact that what I bring to the table and just show them through the keynote. It's very illustrative, and it's a cool kind of stories that I tell to showcase why they're making those decisions and why they should probably just stop for a minute and have a look, because they might have gone a different way. So it's taught me a lot about that. It's taught me a lot about, and obviously I've used that in my own life as well. What else has it taught me? I don't know, that humans are definitely fallible and that there is a limit, and we need to respect life and be careful and take safety very, very seriously.
What taught you that, though? Go ahead. What were the things that happened that made you so respectful of the fragility of life?
Yeah, so it has been a journey, because I think a lot of, when you're younger, you feel a little more bulletproof, and testosterone's flowing a lot thicker through the veins. Yeah, I've been in some situations where, looking back, I've pushed the boundaries beyond where I should have. That I can't say, because those are the ones that have taught me the most. But I've pushed them far, and yeah, I've done other challenges that I've made. What's the right word? cheeky decisions where I've been told by the people at the experts saying, no, the weather's not good. It's not a good day to go. But I know if I don't go on this day, I'm going back to South Africa without trying the challenge. So I push it and I force it and I kind of get myself into the water. And just one of them in particular really kicked me in the bum and put me in hospital for a while, having my lungs drained. So yeah, you know what? The lessons like that have told me
they have to drain your lungs because you're swallowing water?
Yeah, I contracted something called SIPE, which is more common than I knew, and that stands for swimming-induced pulmonary edema. So you know a pulmonary edema is? It's your lungs filling with water, and then there's SIPE is obviously just the swimming version of that. But it's a lot, in my opinion. Again, I'm not a medical person, disclaimer, but it's basically a whole chemical disruption in your body that allows moisture or water to seep inside your lungs from inside. So you slowly start drowning. Now, it's quite hard to spot
so you're not even swallowing the water necessarily. It's just absorbing it through your lungs?
Yeah. But in this particular case, I was also swallowing it. But what you swallow isn't going into your lungs. It's going into your stomach, and it's salt water. So that's helping the chemical imbalance. So you're taking in a lot of salt. But there were a lot of things like lack of sleep and quite hectic cold and extended time in rough waters and medications and so you can't pinpoint it. But it was one swim that I really thought I would nail, and it kind of nailed me thanks to the sight thing, which I don't know where it
is. That a result of just the time in the water, just the duration, or did the cold have something that exacerbated the onset of that?
So again, no one has said, Ryan, this is exactly what happened to you. No one knows. And I've spent some time unpacking it. The cold would have definitely played a role. I was in the water for 6.5 hours before it happened. And I was swimming absolutely fine for the first 5.5 hours. And then my lungs started to fill up. And I didn't know. I just thought I was short of breath. And I also know that I've trained so hard to feel shit, if I'm allowed to swear. You don't train to go and do these things thinking that you're going to get yourself in a place where you feel fine. You know you're going to battle. You know you're going to hurt. You know you're going to feel terrible. So when you start feeling terrible, it's hard to decipher a medical terrible from a cold terrible because they're not that different. And I just pushed myself further and further. Plus, I had a support crew on the boat whose job it was to drive me and push me. They didn't know that I was essentially drowning from within. So they were pushing me harder, which was their job to do. And I was pushing myself and eventually just didn't have enough oxygen in my head and I kind of blanked. Anyway, enough about
you passed out?
No, I don't think I did. Although it has been reported that I might have. I don't remember.
Yeah, I guess you wouldn't remember, would you?
We need to ask the people
I don't remember getting out the water. I don't remember. I was in the water. I remember feeling desperate at one stage. I could not get air into my lungs. I remember my eyes, everything going black. So I actually take my goggles off in the water and my eyes are just puffy. I've seen that in photos. The next thing I knew, I was on the boat. So no one has said, Ryan, you passed out, you're unconscious. I don't think I was. I think I probably
Does anyone ever try these without a boat?
I'm sure
seems so unsafe.
Not the very long ones. Again, it depends what you're doing and whether there are currents and shipping lanes. You take English Channel and it's a hectic shipping lane, and North Channel, and these you don't want to be out there by yourself. You get run over by these super tankers that hurtle down there. And they're busy. You're not going to get through there alive. However, if you're trying to swim a Lake Tahoe or something like that, which is maybe more benign in terms there's no ships anyway, and you've got your flotation, you probably can do it by yourself. You will have to take your feed, depending how long it is. If you try to do a 20-mile swim and it's going to take you between 8 and 15 hours, you have to hydrate. I don't think you're going to get across without hydrating and feeding and refeeding. You're going to burn the tank empty, and you're going to be out in the middle of the ocean and not be able to do anything. You're going to hit the wall badly. Where
did this SIPE happen, the swimming-induced pulmonary edema?
I was attempting the North Channel, which is from Ireland across to Scotland.
Okay.
So I was in Donegal, but that happened literally in the middle of the channel.
Tell me a little bit about the Great Arctic Swim.
The Antarctic Swim?
Yeah.
Probably. Because, yeah, I've swum in the Arctic and the Antarctic, but the one that's got the most acclaim was a couple of us had been swimming and pushing our own boundaries in the element of cold for quite a while. So going to different places, firstly all around South Africa and Cape Town, and then eventually up to different places in the world looking for colder water where we could push ourselves a little bit further. And within this whole process, quite a cool story is that we realized that there is no body or book of record or anything out there that records different feats in the element of cold. And what we had established very clearly for ourselves is that anything done with the element of cold sucking the life out of you is exponentially more difficult. And we were kind of thinking it should be recorded, especially obviously swimming being prime. And it turned out there was absolutely no body or book of record or anything that monitors that kind of stuff or records that or tells you what you need to do. So a bunch of us, led by a gentleman by the name of Ryan, started the International Ice Swimming Association. It was his idea. He put it all together. But essentially, as a group of friends under his guidance, we said to the world that if you want to say you've done an official cold swim, you have to do it under our organization, and you have to swim a 1 mile distance, 1,609 meters. You have to swim that 1 mile wearing only a Speedo type costume, one silicone cap and goggles, no grease, no wetsuit. You can't even have a Band-Aid. We're going to be very purist. We also said you have to swim that 1 mile in your Speedo in an outdoor body of water. It can't have a roof over your head. And you have to swim that mile in water that is 41 Fahrenheit and below. 41 Fahrenheit is 5 Celsius, right?
Dude,
if you can do that, the International Ice Swimming Association will give you a certificate that says you have done so. We'll give you a red jacket with a badge after you pay us some cash. And you'll go on our book of record as having done an official ice mile. So my friends spent a lot of time making that all official and association. And we sent that out into the world. And that actually, believe it or not, caught on quite nicely. But where I'm going with this is now, we were the 5 founding members of the International Ice Swimming Association, which started getting nice recognition, and we were flown all over the world doing different challenges. And we had reached, and this is actually, I should tell it from a personal point of view. I don't want to speak for the other guys, but I'd reached a point where I'd pushed so often my own personal boundaries. So finding different challenges, distances, and temperatures that I didn't know if I could do. But I knew that if I really got my head behind it and I did the training and I found the money and I put the team together and conditioned myself well enough, I would probably be able to get it done because it's been done before. Now we wanted to go a little bit further and have a look what was meant to be humanly possible under the element, within the element of cold, and see, what does the medical fraternity say, and see if we could push a little bit past that. And that was one of the reasons that I joined the crew going to try and swim an official ice mile south of the Antarctic Circle. And that was where we were going to go push that boundary. Now, it's a fascinating story, actually. There's a whole chapter of that, in fact, 2 chapters of that in my book. So I won't go into amazing detail unless you want me to. But lots went wrong. Lots and lots and lots went wrong. We eventually didn't get the geographic goal. We weren't south of the Antarctic Circle because the ship that we were on went south of the circle, but then the weather was so terrible on that side that we never got opportunity. And obviously the ship wouldn't wait there for us, had 180 other paying passengers on it. But just as we crossed over, I think it's 66 degrees south again, we got an opportunity to make an attempt on the official mile. It made no difference to the temperature, by the way. It was just a geographic goal that we wanted to try and say we've done. And I eventually ended up giving a go on swimming that mile. And of course, we were banking on it being about maybe 2 degrees Celsius, which is what, 36, 35 Fahrenheit, I think. But we ended up finding the coldest water that existed there, which was -1 Celsius, which is 30 Fahrenheit. And I'd never swum in that, never felt that. So, and every degree in that lower end of the scale, it doesn't make just a tiny difference. It makes a massive difference to the onset of hypothermia and how it sucks the life out of you. So on the higher end of the scale, if you're going from sort of 60 down to 55, you'll feel that difference, but it's not brutal. But if you're going from 35 down to 30, that's a significant difference to the amount of time you can spend. So anyway, I spent 32 minutes trying to complete my mile at 30 degrees Fahrenheit in my Speedo in Antarctica, and got it right.
Wow.
So that was a long time in that water, and it was absolutely brutal, but wow, life changing really.
Does the cold impact your speed when you're swimming? And how much? I mean, to what degree? I can imagine that it makes a difference, but how much slower is your mile when you're freezing cold versus 80-degree water or something?
Yeah, so I can't give you exact speeds, but you can understand what's happening. Obviously, with swimming, mostly I don't kick a lot, and generally you don't see many long distance swimmers kicking like gala swimmers, because the big muscles of your thighs suck a lot of energy out, and they don't give you that much propulsion. So a swimmer,
most long distance swimmers are kicking just to stay afloat.
Correct. So my legs kind of flop and they just keep buoyant. They don't offer me any propulsion. So all my propulsion comes from my shoulders and my arms. Now, when you get into the cold water, at first you're fine, off you go. But that blood that is supplying your muscles with oxygen to fire up, oxygen is obviously needed for your power. That blood leaves all those extremities and sits in your center core because it wants to keep your heart beating. You can live without arms and legs, but your body knows that you're going to die if it doesn't keep the heart pumping blood to the brain. So all the blood leaves your extremities and sits in your center core. Now, when your muscles don't have a fraction of the blood they should have, they're not getting the power for the oxygen. So your arms become uncoordinated and you lack power. And that obviously slows you down quite dramatically. And that's the problem of this cold swimming. You want to get out quicker, but it's making you swim slower, which is keeping you in longer. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that I've learned. If I go and I do at my pace, I do, let's say I did a kilometer, so 1,000 meters in that same temperature. When you dive into cold water, your core temperature, as I said, the blood's rushed there. So your core temperature is maintained for a certain amount of time. So if you had to take a graph of my core temperature, it would be a straight line while I'm swimming for a while, maybe slight downwards. Okay, so it kind of maintains, and mine maintains for about 14 or 15 minutes. And that's enough time for me to do a kilometer. So I can do a kilometer quite quickly. I'll get out and I'll have a proper shiver, and I'll say a few swear words, have a hot chocolate, and then I'll be fine. When I'm in for longer than 15 minutes, I get to that point, all of a sudden, the trajectory of my core temperature starts to go down. So you generally maintain your core temperature for a while. As soon as it starts going down, it goes down at a rapid pace. And that's where it gets really deadly and very, very difficult to perform.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, just doing cold plunges in my backyard at 39 degrees, if I go for more than 3 minutes, if I get up to like 5 minutes, I'll start to get lightheaded. Like, I remember the first time I did it and I really like increased the time. Again, only 5 minutes. I got out and I was like almost fainted walking up the stairs back into my house. I was like, that was dangerous. I didn't like that.
Yeah.
That's 5 minutes. Yeah, you're talking half an hour.
Yeah, you'd probably lost control of some of your extremities at that point.
It was it was like it was a very uncomfortable, like out of control feeling of like, oh, this is not just, I'm not just cold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
something else is going on.
Something's happening to me. This is not good.
So you have do you know what the after drop is? I'll tell you what was happening. So there's a phenomenon known as the after drop. And the most dangerous part of any extreme cold swim or exposure is not while you are swimming. That is dangerous and it will eventually get you. But the most dangerous part is generally when you get out of the water. And the reason for that is while you're swimming, you're lying horizontal. All the blood, as I've said many times now, has left your extremities and is now sitting in your center core. And again, extremities, biceps, thighs, not just fingers and toes. Sitting in your center core, keeping your core temperature where it needs to be or as close to it as possible. When you get out that water, all the blood in your core temperature starts to release and do what it needs to do, because now these extremities need some oxygen. So it starts to go back to your extremities, but your extremities are now freezing cold, right? So what happens to that warm blood? It rapidly cools. And then that cool blood circulates back to your center core. So your core temperature goes down, hence the name after drop, after swim drop, or after exposure drop. Your core temperature keeps going down. And that is what happens. Generally, you'll see people getting out of ice plunges or longer swims, and they're not shivering. They feel fine. They're great. Ha. What was the problem?
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, 3, 4, 5 minutes later, the shivers start coming in, and then it becomes really serious. Obviously, there's degrees and degrees. Sometimes it's just a hard shivering's good. It means you're on the up. But when you get out and you're not shivering, that's quite a dangerous space to be.
That's it. That's interesting.
Yeah, the shivers, man, it would take me
And they just won't
so
stop.
long. Yeah, so long to get back up to. I mean, I'll go put on wool socks and sweatpants and a hoodie and a beanie and be like, just sit on my couch for 30 minutes. This is what I have to warm up.
Yeah.
So I don't push the temperature as much as I used to, but I can imagine that it's not a fun feeling when you're pushing it to that degree, and then when you get out, it's like it's not over.
Yeah. So we've trained ourselves to know and kind of let me just say I'll talk for myself. Our motto mentally is that the swim is not over until you turn the corner. So that means your swim is not over when you get out the water. You still got the most dangerous part to face. So we figure out how to recover. And when your core temperature is doing the after drop thing, it's going down, down, down. At some point, it's going to bottom out and it's going to start coming back up. And that's what we call turning the corner. And once it's turned the corner and the shivering sets in, it's brutally horrible usually, and it's very painful, but that's quite euphoric. And I think that's why this cold immersion thing has taken on. Again, forgive me, anyone who knows better than me, this is just my perception of it, is because you have different degrees of that euphoric feeling. When you turn the corner and your body starts warming up again, it releases tons of endorphins, and that's wonderful for the mind and positivity and anxiety and all these things. It gives you a nice flush, and you become a little bit addicted. You want to do it again. As horrible it is getting in, it's the recovery that's actually quite euphoric.
Yeah. Ryan, the final question. What would you say is your biggest decision-making tip for business owners?
My biggest decision-making tip to anyone who cares to listen is to spend some time understanding how the human mind works. Because the decisions you make when you feel uncomfortable, or there's a little bit of fear or uncertainty, or you don't know the outcome and you haven't been there before, is very different to the decision you make when you do. And us as humans are absolutely geared to make decisions in a certain way, to stay in our lanes, which is the proverbial good old comfort zone where we deliver good performance. We get by, there's a roof over our heads, there's food on the table, everybody's happy, hitting our number, but you're staying inside that comfort zone. It's when you make that decision that puts you outside, those two lines that I mentioned earlier, when you make that decision that puts you in the middle, in that very uncomfortable space, which we default away from, that's where the growth happens. That is where the beauty happens, where the magic happens, as uncomfortable as it might be. And even if you do fail, which I doubt you will, the growth happens there as well. And that's where the learnings happen. So I say understand how the mind is working when you are really brutally nervous about something and there's fear involved. You are making a decision that is mixed with hundreds of years, hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. So think about it and try and understand it a bit better, and you'll see your decision patterns might change as well.
Thanks for being here, Ryan. I learned a lot. Where can people connect with you and the work that you're doing?
Easiest is always the website. It's Ryan Stramrood. I don't know if you're going to have anything up on the course. Stramrood, STRAMROOD.com. But I'm probably most active on LinkedIn and Instagram. Ryan_Stramrood is where you find me on Insta. That's where what's next and all the cool stuff gets posted.
Ryan Stramrood, thanks a lot, man.
Thanks so much.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the interest, guys. Cheers.
I think Ryan's insane. Dude, no, it was brilliant. It was so interesting talking with him. But the things I picked up from that really two things, and they're about process. One is that when you're engaging into the process, having a mindset up front that there's going to be pain, there's going to be difficulty, and not just embracing it, but knowing that it's there, seeing it as a challenge, accepting that it's going to happen. The other is looking at finishing the process. He talked at the end about the after drop that I see so many times in my own experience, people experiencing a process. Just happened to me with a general contractor where they will take you through a certain part of the process, but not finish the process. They'll get you to agree to do this work, and then they'll do that work, but not quite finish the work. Or you've had that experience with somebody who's selling you something and they don't quite finish great. And I think that there is a tendency as business owners to forget that the process continues for our clients and our customers, probably long past when we think the process is over.
What do you mean?
Well, for example, if you are bringing on a new client, let's say a financial planning client, they agree to do it. They sign up on all your forms. Well, then you've got to actually move money over to you. Well, then you might think you're done. Oh, we've moved the money. We've got it invested. We're hunky-dory. And yet the client might be thinking, I need somebody to walk me through how to access the website. I need somebody to walk me through how to read the statement. I need somebody to help me feel good about this decision that I'm now better off. There's a lot of things that maybe the customer needs that we don't necessarily intuitively build into a process.
Yeah, that's a fair takeaway. Getting the business is definitely not like the end of the work, but I guess for a lot of people who are founders, owners, and also the head salesperson, it's very easy to like move on now and kind of do the next thing.
Yeah.
And with no clear system in place, none of your employees are picking up that baton.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, fair enough.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Decidedly Podcast. To be notified when new episodes are released, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And while you're there, drop us a 5-star review because it helps more people defeat bad decision-making right alongside you. For show notes, decision-making insights, more episodes, and links to resources mentioned in this episode, check us out at decidedlypodcast.com. If you'd like us to help you make a decision, leave us a message at decidedlypodcast.com/make-my-decision for a chance to have your question featured in an upcoming episode. For more decision-making content, check us out on Instagram or Facebook at Decidedly Podcast. As always, thanks for listening. This is Decidedly.